once again, just to remind you, please check out Stelios's podcast, Stelios's webinar tomorrow at 6, and then check out his course to learn to become more like, Powell, who was a wonderful classicist, among other things and among other sources of his genius. So Brazil is meant to be hosting COP30. This is the big climate shindig where the great and the good go and fly their private jets to remote parts of the world to discuss how they can pretty much starve everybody else of resources, especially of energy and of cheap food. And the communists were sort of going on about how this must engage with the favelas and walk alongside the favelas, because the future of cities will be defined by climate, and it will only be just if it is collective. There are other ideas about justice, however. One of them is war, I would suggest. This basically is what happened in Brazil yesterday. At around dawn, the governor of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, sent 2,500 armed police and soldiers with helicopters, armored vehicles, and drones to fight against a gang called the Red Command, or Comando Vermelho, a criminal organization that sort of grew out of Brazil's prisons. And in case you were wondering, yes, you can identify these gangsters quite easily because they tend to love tattooing themselves, their faces and their bodies and so on, in line with the rest of the Latin American gangs. Their beloved themes are snakes, Tasmanian demons. Does that tell you something? Chucky, the murderous doll, octopuses, goblins, etc., etc. So these guys tattoo themselves in a very elaborate way. These are gangs that grew out of the prisons. Pretty much all of the politicians in Brazil are actually connected to them one way or the other.
I mean, the brilliant thing about El Salvador, of course, is that, everyone has sort of given up on it, and all the academic experts were saying that it cannot be recovered.
Yes.
And then somebody came along with a brilliant idea of, why don't we just go around and arrest everybody with MS-13 tattooed on their forehead and put them in jail for the rest of their life?
Yep.
And the clever thing is that it worked brilliantly, and El Salvador is now safe to walk at night.
Yes.
Probably one of the safest places in the world.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
Now, the favelas, according to the lefties, are wonderful places that are full of culture. So this particular gentleman has a blog about, among other things, exploring the beauty of the favelas. Rio de Janeiro favelas, previously referred to as cortiços, have grown in size and complexity, primarily due to factors like rural exodus, industrialization, and urbanization, as the favelas eventually became too large to ignore by the mid-20th century. Despite the military dictatorship's attempt to eradicate favelas in the 70s, they still exist today. Over time, favelas have developed into a hub of the city's culture, encompassing a range of activities based around the city's pop culture, art, and urban music genres like Brazilian funk and hip-hop. The criminal underworld of gangs, drug dealing, and violence.
I can just see Western leftists skipping around these places, wide-eyed and wondered about all the culture that they're experiencing. And I'm sure for a number of days, they probably get away with it perfectly fine. But I travel a lot, and those sort of areas, you need to be frosty.
Isn't there a Hollywood myth that in very poor places like India and the favelas in Brazil, people treat life as a gift and they have a respect for life?
Yeah, that's absolute nonsense.
Also, this is the Dominic Toretto neighborhood, Fast and Furious.
Absolute freaking nonsense. And the objective reality is that these places have sort of 3 times the murder rate of the rest of Brazil. There's always an ethnic component, like, the 90% of people in the affluent districts are white, whereas 90% in the favelas are not, shall we say. And the favelas are located all over the city of Brazil. So if you want to sort of decide to the city of Rio, if you want to sort of choose some nice destination in Rio, let's say Copacabana, it's right here. And it's flanked by one favela, two favelas, three favelas. Ipanema, the famous beach, the girl from Ipanema, again, a favela right on top of it. The Maracana, along with its stadium, nope, actually not immediately there, but again, not too far away from it. Christ the Redeemer, there's a favela next door. Pretty much everywhere you go in Rio, you find these massive favelas. And the one that was targeted is this one here, and it's called Alemão. And it's basically controlled by this CV gang, Red Command, whatever it is in Portuguese. And they've been waging a turf war against some of their enemies and expanding. And things have gotten so bad in Brazil that the right has its own militias that work in extortion and in attacks on legitimate businesses to protect them from the left-wing gangs associated with President Lula and his party. Every time this kind of incident happens, Lula's PT party, the Workers' Party, comes out in support of the favelas and sort of condemning the human rights abuses.
Lula and his completely unsuspicious electoral win.
Absolutely unsuspicious, yes.
Where he then subsequently went on to jail his political opponent.
Yes, yes. Although, to be fair to him, he had previously been jailed on corruption charges.
Yeah, but he was actually guilty.
But he was actually guilty.
Yes.
But he was actually guilty. The level of corruption that comes from this kind of diversity is insane. And the political system in Brazil is so fractured and broken, and it doesn't allow anybody to actually be in control of the country and exercise authority. And so the result is this kind of chaos. And the result is that the most important economic center of the country is run by gangsters, and every nice tourist attraction in the city, and there are many of those. There's beautiful churches in Brazil, in Rio, wonderful beaches, all kinds of things to do and see, but you have to navigate the favelas next door. And what ends up happening is that as you're traveling around, some guys from the favelas will pop up, rob you, and then run into these lawless urban areas.
Yeah. And quite frankly, it'd be wise just to accept your loss rather than follow them in.
Yes. Do not, under any circumstances, chase them into the favelas.
I heard that at night they don't stop at the red traffic lights. Maybe.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And Rio could be such a gem if it had a Bukele-type figure.
If it had a Bukele-type figure who was willing to sort of lock up people with tattoos on their bodies identifying them as members of gangs and throw them in jails indefinitely, all of Brazil would improve enormously.
Mm.
But when this kind of thing is attempted, you start hearing howling from the regular suspects and from the human rights organizations, claiming that this is a terrible, terrible thing and a violation of the human rights of the gangsters. So human rights activists and opposition politicians voiced outrage at the historic day of bloodshed. Because what had happened, is that to try to undermine Lula's festivities, the police were sent into one of these favelas, and 64 people ended up getting killed, including 4 police officers. And it seems that the operation might be ongoing, and it seems that this is a multi-day thing. The governor has declared that the governor who is right-wing and who is supposedly associated with the right-wing militias has declared that now they've started a war against organized crime. The reality is they keep on saying this. And people like the Red Cross, for example, keep on condemning them for wanting to wage war against criminal gangs and saying that this is a huge violation of human rights and it undermines human rights and so on and so forth. And you shouldn't treat it as a military thing. But the thing is, for the police to enter these favelas, they need drones and helicopters and armored vehicles. So it is a war. And then the gangs start doing very neighborly and cultural things, like setting cars on fires and putting them into barricades so that the police can't actually go through. So if you're a random civilian and you have a nice car, they'll take it, put it in the middle of the road and set it on fire just so the police can't get to them. And this is supposed to be, according to the left, culturally enriching. And doing something about it, according to the left, is a violation of human rights.
So I'm a bit confused with what happened here. So you say there's right-wing gangs and left-wing gangs, and there's presumably also a whole slew of criminal gangs.
Yes.
So who was ordering the troops in on this occasion, and which gang were they going after?
This was the governor of Rio.
It was a right-wing governor.
It was a right-wing governor going after the Red Command, which is closer to the PT, the party of President Lula.
And then the ruling party, Brazil as a whole, is now trying to shut it down.
The ruling party is saying, yes, we will put them in federal prisons, and we condemn the human rights atrocities. And not only that, the gangs themselves started using drones to drop explosives on the police and military.
Good God.
So the idea that this isn't a war and shouldn't be treated as a war is insane. And the only genuinely humane thing to do is to sort of find anybody with a gang tattoo anywhere on their bodies and throw them in a high-density jail under permanent surveillance.
Do exactly what Bukele did.
Exactly.
I mean, and you've said this to me a whole number of times. What is it you always say to me? It's something like mercy to the guilty is cruelty
to the innocent.
Yes.
Mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the
Adam
innocent.
Smith.
Yeah. Bukele is now a verb. To Bukele something is to fix a problem that liberals say is too complicated by simply ignoring their long-winded excuses and just doing the obvious.
I'm not sure I like that as a verb because it reminds me of something else with a very different meaning, but...
It is named after the leader of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, who has turned a country that was once dubbed the murder capital of the world into one of the safest. And the same can be done in Brazil. But Lula's policy, which is very similar to the policy of AMLO and his successor in Mexico, Scheinbaum, is another variation on hugs, not bullets, that basically, when we think about crime, we should think about the social factors, and we should think that the criminals are themselves the victims of the system, and that if the system wasn't racist, yes, exactly. If the system wasn't racist and evil and discriminatory, this crime wouldn't happen. The reality is that the system needs to be far more discriminatory and far more aggressive, and it needs to treat criminals as people with agency and the ability to make choices.
But also care about the common good.
Well, that is caring for the common good.
Yeah.
That is
because even if you do have the case of a criminal who is mentally insane, actually not according to MSM,
right?
There is the question of just you have to do something about it. You have to incarcerate them because they constitute a public threat.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
What you're describing seems to me to be completely an attempt to create a parallel reality in people's minds, which is just what many times corrupt governments are doing.
Yes, which is...
Because this focus on human rights is, I will say, as you have said, is entirely misleading because sometimes it's either you or them.
With criminals, it is always you or them.
Yeah.
With criminals, it is always you or them. And the idea that these criminals are simply victims of circumstances, as opposed to people with agency, and with the ability to make choices, including moral choices and immoral choices, that crime is some kind of natural phenomenon that just sort of emerges due to economic inequalities. When everywhere you look, there are these steady correlations that keep on recurring in one society after the other, and tell you a very clear story. And the story, I won't repeat it here because YouTube will ban it, but you know what it is. But the other side is, how do you deal with this? Well, you lock up criminals and you hang them if they are guilty of murder or rape. It's that simple.
Well, that's the thing.
And I'd argue hang them for drug dealing.
I mean, that's the thing. All of the problems that the UK have are a choice.
Yes. Yes. And that's the other thing. If this lawlessness in Britain that you mentioned in your segment keeps on happening, there will end up being a situation where the only way that the police can enter somewhere like Birmingham or Bradford or whatever is if they use armored vehicles and drones and the military to go in and enforce order. And this was not a huge operation. I mean, if you look at this favela, it's a sort of tiny part of Rio, and it's not really that one here is bigger than bigger than the Vigário Geral, whatever that is. It's bigger than Alemão. There are other places that are just as bad, but this has been allowed to fester and keep on growing to the extent that several favelas sort of linked up with each other,
right,
and became one giant one. And if you tolerate this, you can see that happening to cities in the north of Britain. You can see that happening in London. You can see that happening all over, where the police are going to end up needing armed forces, drones, armored vehicles, and enormous casualties to execute basic things.
I love the description there. It's known for being one of the most violent and dangerous areas of the city, then goes on to say it has a vibrant culture and a strong sense of solidarity.
Like, where is the solidarity if your neighbor is a murderer? How are they exercising solidarity if you're...
Why is that a good thing?
Like, if what your neighbor is doing is taking your 12-year-old kid and teaching them that the way to advance a society is to sell drugs and murder people, that's solidarity?
Well, solidarity is always solidarity to whom? And they're talking about their own political allies. Because from the perspective of the left, those who aren't allies of theirs are people whose individuality doesn't have to be respected, because they're either the consciously the enemy, or they're just the useful idiot of the enemy.
Yes. But at the same time, the criminals don't have agency according to the left, because they are simply victims of circumstance.
For bad things,
Exactly. Yeah. So in the left's perspective, everything is predetermined and you don't have free will, and you're either part of the elite and should be killed and destroyed and taxed to death, or you're part of the oppressed and you are allowed to get away with anything because you are traumatized by the oppression that you have suffered. And that's exactly what's happening in Brazil. Now, it gets roped into this kind of political football. It's pretty evident, I think, to me, that the governor of the governor of Rio chose the timing of this operation to sort of rain on Lula's climate parade. And I'm all for raining on climate parades, that's fine by me. But the city is lawless. And the nicest parts of the city are right next door to these favelas. And saying that the favelas are culturally enriching you is just freaking insane. It's just absolutely mad. So,
of doctors and engineers.
Doctors and engineers of the favelas, yes. Doctors and engineers of the favelas. Well, don't tell Keir Starmer, because what he's going to do is sort of try to bring them to Britain. Already in my town, I see a couple of Latin Americans and I'm like, you guys are obviously part of a gang. How did you end up here?
We know that Keir Starmer has a sudden taste for young foreign gentlemen.
Well, that's another thing. Age-restricted adult content. What this video shows is the prisons in El Salvador.
Oh, right.
And apparently this is age-restricted, and you have to confirm your age.
What to see a prison?
To see men in prison. To see men in prison, yes.
Right. Okay.
And so, I mean,
I hope they're not bathing.
I want to say thank you to the Dories for this wonderful addition to our segment.
So the online safety bill is being used to stop us finding out about immigrant murders, and also to stop us finding out the fact that they could be stopped at any time.
Yes. That's a perfect summary of it. Yeah. And you should thank Nadine Dorries for that, and you should thank Nigel Farage for putting her in the party now.
Well, yes. I mean, obviously what reform needs is lots and lots of Tories.
The state of leftist insanity when it comes to crime is just beyond me. People have agency, and they're guilty if they're guilty.
They want us to completely accept decline.
Yes.
And have a very narrow idea of what is politically possible.
Yes.
And they want to censor any sign that their idea of what is politically possible is stupid.
Yes.
And narrow.
Yep, pretty much.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.